Good morning, everyone. In today's special edition of the Geo Interview, we have the pleasure of hosting Mr. Sharad Sharma. Mr. Sharma is a passionate evangelist of the software product ecosystem in India. He co-founded the iSPIRT Foundation and has served as the chair of NASCOM Product Foundation. Sir is known for his crucial contribution to the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill 2023. Sir, we welcome you here and we are thrilled to have you on this forum with us. With your permission, may I ask the first question, which is about India Stack?
Sure.
So with the introduction of India Stack, India has revolutionized its digital infrastructure. If you could elucidate on the policy objectives behind its implementation and the long-term vision for its evolution for our audience.
So India Stack was conceived way back, believe it or not, 10 years ago, 2013, late 2013, early 2014 timeframe. And at that time, our goal was that we wanted to address two deficits in India. One is the innovation deficit, and that is particularly true for innovation for Bharat. Now, of course, Bharat has a slightly broader term now, but up till now, the Bharat was India, Middle India, right? And I'll explain what that is in a minute. And what is called as a jobs deficit, because that's also an important area. So the thinking that emerged was that to deal with innovation for Bharat, and what is Bharat here? We divide up India into three parts: India 1, India 2, and India 3. India is roughly about 300 million families. So the first 100 million, the richest 100 Indian families are India 1, middle is India 2, 100 million families, and the poorest are India 3. And the thinking has been for now more than 10 years that middle India, the India 2, is not sufficiently served by the market. In fact, if you look at it, everybody serves India 1. India 1 is 100 million families, 400 million people. They have disposable income. Everybody wants to serve them. But India 2 is very poorly served. Now, there are exceptions. For example, Jio came along and decided to focus on India 2, right? And so that was very important. So the thinking is that we have a deficit, an innovation deficit for India 2. Not enough people are innovating for India 2. And how to do that is through startups. But startups can innovate only if they have some foundation on which to build upon. So that foundation is India Stack. Just the way, you can imagine that there'll be no Uber in the world if there was no GPS. GPS is you can say, a digital public infrastructure that was built by the US government that anybody in the world can use. If there was no GPS, there would have been no Uber today, right? So the reality is that even Silicon Valley companies need this public infrastructure of some kind or the other to be able to innovate. So, for example, if there was no Stanford research, there would be no Google. If there was no DARPA, there would be no Cisco, and so on and so forth. Now, in India, we don't have these institutions. So a group of volunteers came together and they said, we are all techies. We have been innovating, for our respective companies in the past. Why don't we innovate for Bharat? And the way for us to innovate for Bharat was to help build this infrastructure, this kernel layer, which will allow startups to build on top of this. And so that's really one part that is important. That's addressing the innovation deficit for Bharat by giving them India Stack, by giving India Stack to startups. The second, as I said, is a deficit to do with jobs. In every country in the world, even developed countries, new jobs are created by small businesses. Big businesses don't create many jobs. Cumulatively, if you take all the jobs that have been created, they will all come from small businesses. In India, we have a peculiar problem with small businesses. Our small businesses are handicapped because they're not able to get any credit. So you have a problem of insufficient credit for small businesses. Now, this is the problem that is well understood. In fact, back in 2018, RBI even set up a UK Sena MSME committee, a very well-regarded committee to address this, and that laid the foundations, and people from iSPIRT were very intimately involved in that. I was a member of that committee. and we were able to design a system that will allow us to solve this problem. And today that system runs on top of India Stack, and it is called OCEN, Open Credit Enablement Network. So we did 2 years of pilots, and now we are literally in the middle of actually saying it is ready for prime time. So in the years to come, hopefully it will grow quite substantially. And there are open house sessions you can find very easily on iSPIRT blog or on Twitter or on YouTube channel and other places if people want to learn about that. So really, this is what has animated us, saying that can we solve the jobs problem by equipping our MSMEs with a new type of credit called cash flow credit, unsecured cash flow credit. Can we equip our Bharat with more innovation by giving our startups an ability to innovate? For both of these, the underlying layer is India Stack. So India Stack is that collection of things that allow people to solve those two big problems for India.
Okay, so I think you mentioned about digital public infrastructure. My next question was going to be about the same. So currently, India had the G20 summit. It was, very well received, and we sort of got the New Delhi Declaration, which is thing of pride. And seeing that digital public infrastructure is a very important part of the future that is going to be ours. My next question would be that the G20's acknowledgement of India's digital public infrastructure prowess marks a significant milestone. How do you, sir, envision this recognition shaping India's role in the global setting of digital standards and best practices?
So there is a concept which is called Circle of Five. So, for example, there are about 60 countries that have satellites in space. But all those satellites have been taken to space by only 5 countries, India being one of them, right? So India is the circle of five. Similarly, if you think, okay, you can imagine almost every country will have a mobile operator, will have a bank, will have a hospital, right? But the companies that supply the mobile equipment to the mobile operator, there are only a handful of them. In fact, those companies are called hens: Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung, right? 4 of them. Similarly, every country has a bank, but the people who supply the technology behind the banks, there are a handful of countries, only 5 countries. The same is true for, let's say, even COVID vaccine. There must be more than 100 countries. I'm imagining more than 150 countries that must have given its citizens some kind of a COVID vaccine. But there were only 5 countries that had a COVID vaccine, India being one of them. Right? So the question for India is that can we be in that circle of five? Now, we've been in that circle of five for COVID vaccine. We are in the circle of five for space. But how many other things can you think of where India is in the circle of five? India is not in the circle of five for many, many things. So since you mentioned G20, even in G20, the importance of the country is determined whether they are in the circle of five. For example, France is there in G20. What do we buy from France? We buy Rafale planes, we buy Airbus, we buy nuclear reactors, we buy submarines from them. What do we buy from Spain? Olive oil. So think of it, Spain is not part of G20. So India today, as it stands, despite its growth, is more like Spain than it is like France. It's more like Thailand. Thailand, by the way, we don't appreciate. During the last 25 years, Thailand has grown faster on a per capita basis than China. What is remarkable about Chinese growth is that China has grown almost as fast as Thailand. For a country that is very big, they've grown as fast as Thailand. But frankly, Thailand doesn't. Can you name a single product brand from Thailand? You can't name a single product brand from Thailand, right? But can you name one from Korea? Of course you can. Now, in 1974, Thailand's per capita income was more than that of Korea. But Korea said something is not working. 20 years of Korean War are over. We need to change course because we are not on the right track. And today, by changing that track from 1974, they are 5.6 times the per capita income of Thailand. and Thailand has grown faster than China. So the question is, can India be a breakout country? Now, why everybody wants to see India as a breakout country? India itself wants to see it as a breakout country, right? Is it not? So for that breakout, while space has been a success story of the past, the modern era success story is India Stack. Since you don't want to call it India Stack for everybody else, it's a very, it sounds pointing to ourselves. So a new word was invented, or new phrase was invented. We used to call it digital public goods earlier, till September of last year. But then we realized digital public goods is a very broad term. So in September of last year, it was decided that digital public goods, India Stack, will be one of the focus areas of G20. And there was a scramble to figure out a new descriptor. And we decided that descriptor should be digital public infrastructure, DPI. That term was agreed only in September of last year. Why did all this happen? Because it so happens that one of the people who have been a champion of this revolution that has taken place has been Mr. Amitabh Kant himself, right? So do you know, in December 2016, when the BHIM app was launched by the Prime Minister, it was him, and at that time the minister, or the Secretary of IT, her name is Aruna Sundarajan. They were responsible for that launch that happened. Oaken that I described to you, the sponsor of that, at the request of the PMO, has been Mr. Amitabh Kant. So what has happened is he was very familiar, intimately familiar with the revolution that had taken place in India. And therefore, his desire was that we should share this with the rest of the world because it is very applicable. So that has happened. And now more people understand this revolution that has taken place in India. And therefore, what it does is it allows us to engage with those countries in a meaningful fashion. But having said that, while this is helpful, G20 is helpful, India Stack started going global in 2018, 5 years ago. In fact, the part of India Stack, which is called identity, where in India we use Aadhaar, there are 11 countries outside India which use the digital identity system of India, which is called MOSIP. That is an open source system parked in IIIT Bangalore. And if you go to mosip.io, you will see that today 94 million people are already using it. So the reality is that the biggest software export that of India, quietly, which is not even mentioned to anybody, is MOSIP. And that has been used by 94 million people. Philippines, Sri Lanka, Morocco, countries, in these countries, everybody who will get their digital identity will get it from an Indian system. And this will grow rapidly to 350 million people, because 11 countries that have signed up, their combined population is 350 million people. And there are enough countries in the queue, so we'll get to 1 billion and perhaps bigger than that in the next 18 months or 2 years. So this was a revolution that has been quietly happening, but it was not talked about. It was not visible. It was not something that was communicated by India to the rest of the world. We would love to talk about our Bollywood, soft power of Bollywood. We would love to talk about space, but we would not talk about India Stack and DPI. And G20 allowed us to do that. And therefore, now people around the world, whether they are global north or global south, have started looking at India differently, because they didn't know this India story, and they know the India story. This will be helpful for us in the future, because we are ourselves on a journey of making India in the circle of five for many, many more things. And our view is, at least iSPIRT view is, that there are 6 new bets that have been made, where iSPIRT is involved. India Stack was one of the bets, right? And so that has succeeded. On the back of it, 2 years ago, 6 more bets were made. At least 3 of the 6, perhaps more than that, will succeed. And so hopefully in a few years, we will have these 3 plus 1, 4. And we are preparing to make 16 new bets in the years to come as a country. So our country will arrive when we become in the circle of 5 for something like 10 things, not 2 or 3 things that we are in today. That is the future that India should aspire to, that you youngsters should aspire to, That's the India that we have to bring to life. But it takes a lot of work because that is not the India that we have built so far. This is a new India that we have to build in the future as we go forward.
I think that, to build the sort of future in technology that we want for India to be in the circle of five everywhere, it calls for a revolution. And you also earlier talked about the second strata of citizens, the Bharatis, the citizens of not the high class, but the middle class, upper middle, lower middle, these sections. And I think our government has had this Digital India mission, which I personally see as a huge revolution in bringing India the kind of digital literacy and DPI that we aspire for and that we desire for the future of a Vishwaguru maybe. So as the Digital India mission unfolds, sir, what according to you are the key metrics or the key benchmarks that you can point out to signify its profound impacts on India's digital landscape?
Absolutely, Digital India mission is very important, and this India Stack is, of course, an integral and the main part of that mission. But and it has delivered value. So if you go to 2014, there were 17% of Indians who had a bank account. Today, that is 86%, right? So to go from 17% to 86% has ordinarily taken countries, as per Bank of International Settlement and World Bank assessment, on an average 46 years. India did this in 7 years. Now, the fact that everybody has a bank account is the first form of financial inclusion that you can look at. The second form of financial inclusion, when UPI was launched in late 2016, less than 25 million people had a credit card. Today, you are about to reach 500 million people who can do digital payments. More than 50% of the digital payments in the world are done by India. I remember, once I gave a talk like this, where I mentioned that India will overtake China in digital payments. And Economic Times next day had a mocking article which started on the front page saying, these guys are crazy. Because at that time, if you just go back 3 years, at that time, Indians didn't believe that we could do today 2.5 times the digital payments of what China is doing, because everybody thought the gold standard was Alipay and WeChat Pay. We didn't have the belief and confidence that we can be a leader once we set our mind to make that happen. Today, when it comes to the data economy, because you refer to it, India's way of looking at privacy and innovation in a way that privacy is fully protected and innovation is possible in a very safe way is a model that is unique to India. And it is already growing very rapidly because of the account aggregator, which has been deployed 2 years ago in the financial system. That is what gives the confidence that when we deploy it in new sectors, it will work very well. So this new thinking, which is not to replicate a system that exists, but to design something from first principles, has been an exercise in which the government has played a seminal role to make this happen. So 3 things have come together. Government, I think there are people, volunteers like us, who are based out of Bangalore, may often, but although not entirely from Bangalore, but now it's a broad volunteer group. And the third are our startups. It is an exercise that ties all the 3 things together that has brought this revolution in financial inclusion. And now we are at a point of revolution, which is possibly that we can get credit to small businesses. That was always the goal, right? And that goal, after 10 years of work, is coming into focus, is coming into the realm of feasibility. Because had we not set all these things, if you give me a minute, I'll describe this. So our goal is that a small street vendor, in fact, we call her Rajini, should be able to get a loan. And this vision of Rajini being able to get a loan was clear to us in 2013, believe it or not, right? And that slide, which describes this vision, has been in the public domain since then. So if you put India Stack, iSPIRT, Rajni, a slide will come up with a street vendor in the middle, right? If I have sharing rights, I can even share it here. But that slide required that first we should be able to do KYC for Rajni. At that time, KYC cost 50 rupees for Rajni. We were able to bring it down with eKYC for 2 rupees. That is how the bank account penetration happened. Because if it costs the bank 50 rupees to open a zero balance account for people in a rural area, they didn't want to do it because it wasn't profitable. But if it cost them 2 rupees to do it, they were happy to do this as they go forward. So that was the first. Second, Rajni has to be able to sign a loan agreement. So we created e-sign. E-sign in India, India's e-sign system, a national system, does 3 times more e-signatures than the US. It is the largest e-signature system in the world. Then if you sign a loan agreement, where do you store it? She doesn't know how to store it on Google Docs or Google Drive or anywhere else. So DigiLocker was created for her, right? Then, if you sent her the 400 rupees in the morning and as a loan, and which she was supposed to pay back in the evening, you could only do it in debit cards. Debit cards were very expensive. UPI was created for her. Then you have 2 Rajanis, one pays on time, one doesn't pay on time. Shouldn't the one who pays on time get a cheaper loan? But she'll get a cheaper loan only if she threatens to take her business to some other lender. An account aggregator allows her to take her own data to another lender so that she can get a cheaper loan. So account aggregator was created for her. Oaken has been created for her. Only one thing remains, and that is called the Public Credit Registry, which the FM announced will come in the coming years as National Financial Inclusion Registry, NFIR. It was announced in the budget. So this is, the point I want to make here is that it takes to become good at anything. To become good in space, it took us 20 years. To become good in thorium reactors will take us another 20 years, perhaps. To become good in this digital infrastructure that we've created is already a 10-year plus journey. But, it's a journey that is now is dealing with, benefits for citizens of India and benefits of India's soft power in the world. So these are long-term things that we have to do. We have to figure out how will we do this in many more areas, because without taking a long view, things will not happen. And Digital India is therefore a great success story, as an example that we need to replicate for 20 other things as we go forward. Because without replicating it in many, many more areas, India will not reach its full potential.
Rightly said, sir. I totally agree with you. And when you talked about DigiLocker, it just reminded me of my class 10th in CBSE. And then we had all our certificates sent to us about the CBSE, verification, everything on DigiLocker. Then we had to finally figure it out, because by then the digital literacy wasn't as much as it is now. Now, if you give me DigiLocker, I'll just open it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So that
So
is
now,
something
Anushka,
that
what
we should
happened,
agree on.
therefore, a very important moment for us as a country was during COVID. Can I tell the COVID story? You have time for
Of
it?
course, of
All right.
course.
See, what happened was we normally would have vaccinated 25 million people, right? Because India, roughly 25 million babies are born. So our vaccination program was for those 25 million babies. And we had, roughly between 32 to 40,000 vaccination centers that would vaccinate those 25 million babies. So because based on the season, because babies, as you know, are not born uniformly all through the year, right? So let's say 40,000. Now, it was quite clear that we have to vaccinate 1 billion people. Now, 25 million into 40 is 1 billion people. So therefore, how many vaccination centers do we need? Maybe we need 40 times more vaccination centers than what we had at that time. Because if 40,000 vaccination centers were 25 million people, then that's the number that we need to be able to vaccinate 1 billion people in a year. Is that fair? Do you know how many more vaccination centers we added? Almost zero. You know why? Because what is India Stack? India Stack is to mediate digital infrastructure that manages the flow of people through Aadhaar, through e-sign, and so on and so forth. And what is flow of information? That's DigiLocker, account aggregator, flow of money. That's things like UPI. So what happened was, literally in weeks, the new system was designed for COVID, which was to say that we will use this new system to vaccinate people. Did you get a paper vaccination certificate? Nobody in India got it. Everybody got a digital authenticable vaccination certificate. You could go to the QR code and validate कि actually is this a authentic vaccination certificate or not, right? We were able to do that because that system already existed. We were able to make sure that all the vaccination centers, as a country, we were able to make sure that the vaccination centers that were in the private sector were paid in the night, so that when they started the next day, there was no outstanding payment from the government. Otherwise, they would have worried, government payment, how will it come? Government is notorious for paying late. Luckily, this was not a problem. And everybody had to move through the system through their Aadhaar number. Now, what did it teach us? For years, India had been building these muscles of saying, can we have full penetration, full inclusion of a digital program, knowing very well that there are lots of people, 500 million people, who don't have a phone. And then another set of millions, hundreds of millions of people who don't have a mobile phone. How do you bring them into the digital system? You bring them through ASHA workers, through para health workers. You bring them through the young children like you who could help, because they became the CTOs of the family. They knew how to navigate the system, right? And we were able to discover a very, very important thing, that India has now reached a point where we can get almost full inclusion in a de novo digital system. This is a unique development. What does it mean? Because our systems are designed so that people can use for themselves, or they can have assisted mode. Others can assist them to use that system. And by building both of these modalities well, self-use and assisted use, we are now feeling comfortable as a country that we can get very high coverage for de novo systems as we go forward. That allows India to launch new systems, social service systems for the India 3 in a rapid fashion, in a fashion that was not possible before. So this is a very, very important thing that has taken place as we go forward. Does that help? And that is getting attention of other countries. So that's what is happening.
Right. So I think my next question would be about yet another revolution. We've seen in the technology arena the advent of artificial intelligence. It is often that we may be worried about jobless growth if artificial intelligence comes up. Some are worried about artificial intelligence systems taking up their jobs. So but yet again, we are very well aware as a government that this is something that is going to be our future, and we have to be advanced with it. And my question is regarding the National Mission for Artificial Intelligence, sir. It represents India's commitment to emerging technologies such as AI. So it would be great if you could shed some light on the central pillars of the National Mission of Artificial Intelligence and the anticipated socio-economic transformations that it aims to bring about.
So let's go back to the circle of five. What is going to happen is, in AI, the circle of five is most likely going to be circle of three, right? Why? Because although every country will consume models from outside, right? They'll use artificial intelligence, but will they produce the artificial intelligence models that are needed? Right? Now, clearly, China will do that because they have focused on it very, very heavily over the last, I would say, 15 years. US will do that because, it's actually, they are at the cutting edge. Which will be the third country that will do that? Will it be Europe or will it be India? That's the question. right? And so to be a producer of art. So if we are merely a consumer of artificial intelligence, then we'll again be a digital colony of either China or the West or both. Because if we don't build our own models, right, then if you want to learn about Kumbh Mela, do you think a US model sitting there will know anything about Kumbh Mela? They won't know anything about Kumbh Mela. They won't know anything about Indian culture. They would give you, our cultural heritage will be lost if we go forward, right? So first is, what does it take to have successful AI model building economy in India, right? Now, three things are needed. AI, the ingredients in AI are big data sets. They're called continental data sets. So can India unlock its continental data sets? So that's job number one. Job number two is, if you have those data sets, then you need a lot of compute, a special type of compute to be, that uses the new type of chips called GPUs, right? And they come mostly from a company called NVIDIA, which is benefiting and has become $1 trillion market cap company because they make those chips as we go. Will we have enough of those chips? What US has done is put the high-end chips under export control regime and ban China. China cannot get them. And one day could they do that to India? Answer is they could do that to India as well. So, but anyway, you need chips for this. You need money to be able to get access to either the chips or the computing associated with those chips. The third thing that you need is talent. But in this situation, luckily for us, the talent is there. This whole AI revolution has come on the back of a 2017 paper, whose primary author was Ashish Vaswani. In fact, if you go and list the number of people who wrote the authors, you will see lots of them are Indians. So Indians are thriving in the AI world, not in India alone, but also outside, especially outside, right? So the question is, we have the talent. Now, if we want that talent to come to India, if we want us to have the capital to come to India, right, then we have to make sure we unlock the data sets. Because the only way people will believe that we have that chance to build better models than others, because our companies have access to continental scale data sets of India. Without that, nothing else matters. We will only be a consumer of AI models of the West. So the fulcrum here is data, right? And now there are two types of efforts that are on. One is, how do we get anonymized data sets made available? And second is, how do we get non-anonymized but high quality data sets available in an entirely new way of doing it? This is a somewhat technical thing, but watch out for open house sessions on what is called as DPI for AI. So DPI for AI is coming. If your readers are really interested, they can go to something called DEPA, Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, depa.world. And when they land there, they will see on the left-hand side inference cycle. That's been in India for already 2 years, doing very well. Account aggregator is an example of that. And then DEPA training, which is all for AI. So they can go and read the tech there. The tech is already there. Why is it on a site called depa.world? Because the problem that India is trying to solve is the problem that everybody else other than China and US is trying to solve. So the Europeans are trying to solve this. The Japanese want to solve this. So if our system this is going to be unlike our other parts of India stack. Other parts of India stack, like identity, went out when it succeeded in India. Then in 2018, MOSIP came to life. 9 years after Aadhaar, right? UPI started going out after UPI really succeeded in India. But now the many other countries have woken up and saying, what India is doing in this world field of data for AI or DPI for AI is so path breaking. We want it now. We don't want to wait for whether it succeeds for you or not. We don't care. We believe in it and we want it now. So therefore, we put it on depa.world because it has so much of traction and buy-in from major countries. Of course, our goal is to make sure we don't, lose control over it as we go forward. And so that is a major effort that is going on, and that will happen. So this is one part of the story. that how do you create, we need to do two things in India. One is regulation for AI. What I've described to you is regulation for AI. For AI means that we have a AI ecosystem, that we are building our own AI for India. Are you with me? But we also need regulation of AI, right? So, because the role of the government is to protect its citizens from bad AI, just the way today the government aspires to protect the citizens from bad food, right? So therefore, every food has a label to tell you how much sugar is there, how much salt is there, how much this. So because they say, look, we need to inform our citizens so that they can make better choices related to food, right? So if you buy a car, you can't sell a car in India until it has not been crash tested in Pune, because they don't want unsafe cars to be sold to citizens of India. So even in AI, we need to have regulation of AI that will label that AI, that this AI is not safe for young children to use. This AI is got to be tested before it is deployed with children. Are you with me? Right? So this issue of AI, regulation of AI, is also very important. Now, why is it important? You could make a case it is more important than any other country in the world. Can I make a case for that? Will you humor me for that? Huh? All right.
Yes, sir. Of
So
course, would love to hear.
so why? So AI has two things it can do for us. It can make a middle school teacher a super teacher, right? It can make a ordinary doctor a super doctor. It can make a nurse a super nurse. We already see this. It makes a pilot a super pilot. When we fly in a plane, the flight autopilot is doing almost all the work, right? And the pilots are super pilots because they have very good AI systems that are working in the planes. So AI's power is to make everybody a super teacher, super nurse, super chef, right? You can pick anything and you can become super. Now that's a great thing for India, because India has so many young people who will benefit from this. And if we do this well, 10-20 years, you will see super Indians dominating the world, because they have no shame. In fact, I'm told 31% of the chat GPT prompts come from India, right? So Indians have already embraced this in a big way, because they're young people. They say this is great. I can submit an essay for my political science course in Gargi College by taking the help of chat GPT. My teacher would not know. So they will do that, right? They're clever. Indians are very clever, and native intelligence of Indians, I tend to believe, is the highest in the world. So we will use these systems. There is no doubt, and we will benefit from these systems. Are you with me? Right? So it is important that those systems are, as far as possible, our systems. Because when it comes to teaching mathematics or science, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to teaching political science, our way of thinking about political science is important. When it comes to teaching other parts of social science, it has to be anchored in our own culture. Is it not? So it's very important that all that happens. But there is a flip side of this. That is a problem. The young population today gets distracted by three things. There's a very bad expression for it, and that is games, gambling, and pornography. So this is sometimes called the 3G. Now, what happens is AI is going to make all this more distractive. Games will be more addictive than before. Gambling will be more addictive than before. Pornography will be more addictive than before. Yes, this has the potential to destroy the young population. In fact, just a few days ago, I mentioned his first name, Narayan. 28-year-old aeronautical engineer doing very well, walks in. He asks for a meeting, he comes, and he says, I want to give up my aeronautical engineering. I said, why? Because his 15-year-old cousin had committed suicide. He was the star of the family. He was doing very well in studies. Then when COVID came, they gave him a phone. The parents didn't realize that he had become addicted to games. He was not able to sustain his academic performance anymore, and he ended up committing suicide. And so Narayan went and talked to many people. He did, he's disturbed by what happened to his cousin. He went and talked to, because he's now in Bangalore, he talked to 500 parents, and he found that only 106 parents are even aware of the possibility that this could be happening to their children quietly. Right? Now, think of it. If we don't do regulation of AI that protects our children from becoming distracted and losing their life, because what happens with distraction is you need a prefrontal cortex to be formed. If your prefrontal cortex is not formed, which by the way happens, all the way from 20 to 25. So 18-year-old or a 16-year-old needs the parents' help to be able to decide what's right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do. And if the parents don't even know what they're doing on the phone, then you will have many more lives lost. In fact, some people say that TikTok and social media has resulted in a lost generation in the US, the Gen Z. They call them because they're not able to do anything at all. Do we want that to happen in India? Look what China did. China did, and they said no, they put game time, weekly quotas, daily quotas, and they put strict rules. India as a democracy cannot do that. What is the alternate way can we find? This is the job of political scientists. That this is, I would say, the biggest responsibility that we have, because we are the country with the youngest population. We are also the country, if you take the young people of the world, the largest number of young people are in India. So if we don't do this well, we have foregone our responsibility to the world. The world will suffer. Not only India will suffer. So regulation for AI is very important. Regulation of AI is important. We cannot lean on the West. We cannot lean on China to find answers to these problems. We have to find answers to these problems from our first principles. And that is the effort that has to happen. It cannot just be a government effort. Civil society has to be involved. Think tanks like us have to be involved. Companies have to be involved. It has to be a collective effort. It has to be, all this has to be brought together. And you youngsters have to lead it. The think tanks like yours have to lead this. I would even suggest maybe this is the most important thing that Geostrata can work on. Because if you can make this happen, on one side, the power of fulfilling the potential of the young people is available to us. On the other side, the danger of losing our young people is likely to happen. What could be more important than this? And it can only happen if we bring everybody together to take this forward.
Right, sir. So I think AI is, I think we're on a very slippery ground with respect to AI, because there was this competition that I attended again by a civil society organization. And our last topic, the last round's topic was AI. And you mentioned that you have done philosophy from Hindu College for some time, and then you
I
switched to
was only
DSC.
signed up as a student. I never studied there.
Yeah.
But the
Okay.
backstory is, for my eyesight, I couldn't become an engineer. I was told, because the
Yeah.
rules didn't allow that. So I thought, if they don't let me become an engineer, I'll become a philosopher. It's either an engineer or a philosopher. So that was my
And
thinking
in
at
the
that
end, I think that you have managed to club both. It was
time.
brought the
No,
best in
I
that.
think AI needs engineers to be taught philosophy.
Yeah.
See, because it is a societally shaping technology of a kind that we have not seen in hundreds of years. It is more societally shaping than nuclear technology. It is more societally shaping than perhaps even the printing press. So I think, if we have to deal with as society, we have to almost redefine what it means to be a human. Now, this has happened once earlier. In the Industrial Revolution, you remember, why did Karl Marx write the manifesto? Because at that time, the factories were hiring children, because they didn't need the brawn of fully grown adults. The children, that was coming from the steam engine, so they could get children to do it, and it had created a huge societal crisis. And it was in response to that crisis that Karl Marx wrote that manifesto. It was in the response to that crisis that the US did the 1862 Land Grants Act and created the university system. Abraham Lincoln said that, my history will remember me not for solving the Civil War, which is what people think, but for the Land Grants Act of 1862, because that was the focus of that is that within a generation, we have to make farmers' children non-farmers. They should have productive employment outside farming. And they managed to do it. That's why communism never took root in the US, because that crisis never took place there. And the age of enlightenment happened. We redefined what it meant to have access to education, what it meant, the current conception, the current world that we live in comes from this age of enlightenment. So now a time has to come to rethink all this. And that requires a societal approach for us to do that. And India can lead it, because what will it mean to be human? I can tell you, it will not be about going out, it will be going inwards. It'll be a journey on the inside, not the journey on the outside, which is the living civilization that understands this journey on the inside is India. We have to therefore take the lead in defining what Europe did and US did at that crisis of industrial revolution. That crisis, India has the obligation to do this. So you youngsters are the future who can design this new society of tomorrow, what it means to be a human tomorrow, and what does it mean to now fully meet your own potential, not only on the outside, but also on the inside. That possibility exists in India today. And your think tanks, the young think tanks, have to seize this opportunity with both hands to make it happen. Right? Does that make sense? I have two colleagues sitting here. Their body language indicates that they seem to agree with me. Is that fair?
We will I think we'll definitely try to bring that sort of digital awareness between the youth, and the youth comprise some of Geostrata's largest readers. And we are happy to know that so many people, more than 1 million people every day, read articles and geoshots that we produce, which are based on increasing awareness. And it's good to know that they're interested in that sort of stuff. So I think we can expect this sort of a new age of enlightenment, again, not led by Europe, not led by the West, but led by India and the global South itself.
Absolutely.
That,
That is the spirit in which we have to tackle this, right? And we
absolutely.
can. I feel we can.
With that, I think we come to the end of our interview. I would like to thank you on my behalf, on behalf of the whole team of Geostrata, that you took out the time of your busy schedule and could interview with us. This was a perfect conversation. And in all the interviews that I've taken, it's one of the most enlightening interviews. The facts I got to know, I've literally been noting them down. So thank you so much for being here with us, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.